Republican senators just blew up their own government funding bill at midnight. They got into a big fight with each other in the Senate chambers. They all skirted out very quickly moments ago. Now we move closer to a government shutdown. What everybody expected was going to happen this evening was that the Republicans and some Democrats were going to enter into a compromise, where they were going to approve certain appropriations bills. They were going to remove the Department of Homeland Security funding bill from a package of 5 other appropriations bills. They were going to pass the 5 appropriations bills, the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill, which includes additional funding for ICE and Border Patrol, Gestapo, was going to be passed via a continuing resolution for 2 weeks, for there to be negotiations about certain restrictions on ICE and Border Patrol. And all of this was supposed to pass on Thursday, but then the MAGA Republicans got into a fight with each other. Now, if the appropriations bill passed in the Senate, it was then going to have to be sent back to the House. Even though last week the House passed an appropriations bill that included 6 separate appropriations bill, which is referred to as a minibus, they sent that to the Senate. Democrats in the Senate objected to some of the funding for ICE and the Border Patrol. So if the Senate makes any alterations to the appropriations bill at all, it has to be sent back to the House, because the House and the Senate have to pass identical appropriations bills. Nothing can be different. And once both chambers pass the appropriations bill, then it would go to the president to be signed. But when the Senate was going to make an alteration, what we expected was going to happen was that on Thursday, the Senate would pass the appropriations bill, they would do the 5 that they would approve, then they would do the 1 Department of Homeland Security with ICE and Border Patrol as a continuing resolution for 2 weeks, then negotiate restrictions over those 2 weeks, send it back to the House. MAGA Mike Johnson sent the House of Representatives on another vacation last week when they passed the appropriations bill, so they're in recess. So what we thought was going to happen is MAGA Mike was going to have to call back the House, perhaps get everybody there on Sunday, but we didn't expect all of the MAGA Republicans to show up on Sunday. And so maybe the MAGA Republicans would show back up on Monday. But you see, the government shutdown is set to start basically midnight on Friday, technically 12:01 a.m. on Saturday. We are in another government shutdown. So it appears to be clear right now we're heading into a government shutdown. So what were the MAGA Republicans fighting with each other over, and how did they blow up their own funding bill? Well, the big fight was between Lindsey Graham and other MAGA Republicans. You see, right around midnight, Lindsey Graham, I guess, realized for the first time that the House of Representatives in their appropriations bill removed a provision from a prior appropriations bill that allowed Lindsey Graham and some other MAGA Republicans to sue the Department of Justice, basically to sue the taxpayers, because special counsel Jack Smith subpoenaed phone records regarding individuals who called Donald Trump during the insurrection. And Lindsey Graham and some other MAGA Republican senators and Congress members, their phone numbers showed up. There was no wiretapping or eavesdropping, or the text messages weren't received. Just the actual phone number itself, like on a phone bill, appeared, because Lindsey Graham was speaking to Donald Trump during the January 6th insurrection. So Lindsey Graham in a prior bill built in a cause of action or a legal claim that never existed before, because a lawsuit like that would be banned for him to make millions of dollars suing the United States government and the taxpayers. There was lots of backlash to that. So in this most recent appropriations bill, the House of Representatives, they removed that provision. And Lindsey Graham got pissed and he said, no, that provision has to stay. There was a big fight, everybody stormed out, and now we approach Friday where there is no bill that the Senate has agreed on. They're going to show back up Friday morning and try to figure something out, but we saw all these MAGA Republicans run out of the Senate chamber. We're like, okay, I guess they're not going to be voting on the appropriations bill on Thursday. So again, the MAGA Republicans are a total and utter mess. And they also weren't listening to their Fuhrer, Donald Trump, because Trump was saying, please pass this compromise right now, was what he was saying. Which, as you know, was a bad compromise of Trump saying, please pass it. Although there are some arguments to be made by, I guess, some people that, the Democrats can use those 2 weeks to try to, stop or block any further funding to to ICE or the Border Patrol to stop them. Let me be clear where I stand. ICE and Border Patrol need to be abolished. Those who were involved in the terrorizing of communities, in the killing of Alex Prey and Renee Nicole Gidd and others, must be prosecuted forthwith. And again, get ICE and Border Patrol out of the streets, defund them, abolish them, see you later. That's my perspective. But in any event, people expected that this bill was going to be passed in the Senate, that it would be sent to the House. The House wasn't going to be there. They were going to have to fly back. But then there were worries that some MAGA Republicans in the House were then going to retaliate against the MAGA Republicans in the Senate. I know it's like third graders with these MAGAs. And they were going to add some provisions that would require the Senate to take another vote as well. And you had MAGA Republican Congress members like Anna Paulina Luna and others saying that they were going to put provisions to require that the federal government take over all elections, which would never pass in the Senate. And so, in other words, it's a big mess. So you have some reporters on Capitol Hill, like Andrew Daddario, who announces its official no votes tonight on the appropriations bill. Seems like we're heading into a government shutdown. The Senate will arrive early on Friday to talk about all of this, but it is a complete and utter mess. So, Senator Thune, the majority leader, he left the Capitol as the Senate was without any agreement for a funding deal as we head into a government shutdown very soon. And Senator Thune, the MAGA Republican leader in the Senate, says, well, I hope we can get these issues resolved. Right now, we've got snags on both sides, but tomorrow's another day. Hopefully, people will be in a spirit to try and get this done tomorrow. That's my hope. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer left the Senate chambers and he said Republicans need to get their act together and that Graham is the holdup, but wouldn't say when asked several times if Dems are clear of objections on their side. We also learned that it was Lindsey Graham who put a hold on the funding deal over a House provision repealing what's called the Arctic Frost provisions, authorizing millions of dollars in payouts to senators for special counsel. Jack Smith lawfully validly issued subpoena. Graham apparently got into a big fight with Senator Thune. Everybody was fired up screaming at each other, and that's what went down. Lindsey Graham told the reporter Laura Weiss and others, I fixed the problem that people had. I'm not going to ignore what happened. If you were abused, you think you were abused, your phone records were seized, you should have your day in court. Graham was also railing against the funding deal, saying the cops need us right now. They're being demonized. They're being spat upon. They can't sleep at night. Who are the cops here, Lindsey? You mean the ICE and Border Patrol Gestapo? They're not cops. They're not law enforcement. They're not trained. They do something for 47 days because Trump's the 47th president. So they have a 47-day, whatever you want to call it. It ain't training. It's not the extensive training required of law enforcement. And these are SS. These are Gestapo. These are Trump's paramilitary that need to be abolished immediately. So what was Donald Trump doing this evening while the Senate blew up their own bill at midnight? Well, you had Donald Trump at another premiere for the Melania movie, and he sure looked thrilled to be there. This is the movie that was funded $40 million. Bezos paid Melania $40 million bucks, and then he paid an additional $30+ million to promote it, and nobody wants to see this utter disaster. Trump looks absolutely thrilled.
And what is something that you want people to take away from this film?
Here in this film, they will see a lot of emotion, passion, grief, sadness, celebration, love. Yeah. So that's the message.
And what is something that you want people to take away from this film? Here in Sweden, they will see a lot of emotion, passion, grief, sadness, celebration, love. Yeah. And then this evening, Donald Trump sued the IRS. He sued his own Department of Treasury and his own government for $10 billion. And that's what Trump did tonight. So it's good to know that I'm being sarcastic, of course, that while the American people are suffering, living paycheck to paycheck, psychologically tortured if they're lucky enough to get a paycheck, having healthcare ripped away, while MAGA Republicans are behaving like little babies, fighting with each other and blowing up their own bills right now. As MAGA Mike recessed the House and they're on a vacation, and they weren't going to make it back, and the government was going to shut down. Anyway, Donald Trump is suing the government that's not being funded for $10 billion, saying that when his IRS records were leaked, that caused him grave reputational harm, even though every P is whining about something from like 10 years ago, by the way. It's probably well past the statute of limitation also. And every former president produced their tax records other than Donald Trump. And when Trump's records came out, they also came out through lawful means because eventually the Supreme Court allowed them to be released during the first term when Congress subpoenaed them. It turns out Donald Trump paid no taxes. There were many years where Trump paid $0. Some years he paid $750 in taxes. But this is what Trump did tonight. While our government's about to shut down, Donald Trump filed a $10 billion lawsuit against his own Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. So he's going to now enter into a settlement with Bessent and his own DOJ to pay him $10 billion of our taxpayer money. So we're paying taxes right now to give Donald Trump $10 billion. Do we all realize how utterly offensive that is? And then earlier today, Donald Trump said that he doesn't want housing prices to go down. Let's play this clip right here of Trump saying that.
Existing housing, people that own their homes, we're going to keep them wealthy. We're going to keep those prices up. We're not going to destroy the value of their homes so that somebody that didn't work very hard can buy a home. We're going to make it easier to buy. We're going to get interest rates down. But I want to protect the people that for the first time in their lives feel good about themselves. They feel like that they're wealthy people. And I want them to understand it. There's so much talk about, we're going to drive housing prices down. I don't want to drive housing prices down. I want to drive housing prices up for people that own their homes. And they can be assured that's what's going to happen.